Start in just a minute here, as soon as Rudy's got things up and running. And Fernando's back in. All right, it is 4 o'clock, and I'll call the meeting to order. Roll call. We'll start with you, Steve.
Steve Wilkins, Finance Director.
Janelle Summers, Administrative Assistant.
Ike, City Administrator.
Fernando Alvarado, City Councilor.
Mark Calvin, Mayor.
Sean Nesman, City Council.
Kurt Hein, Public Works.
Julie Osmus, City Council.
And Kathy Schwanta, City Council. Okay, our first order of business will be to get feedback. What have you heard? There was an article in the newspaper, of course, and that causes good public feedback, which we appreciate. So what are folks hearing for comments from even your afterthoughts? Sometimes you have buyer's remorse after you walk out, so just wanted to do a check-in with everyone.
I'll start, thank you. Madam Chair, I'm hearing positive feedback. They're liking the location. There was an issue about whether or not it was going to interfere with the helipad at the city hospital. That was a concern. Security is always a concern, just with that location on the corner there. And when a question was posed as to whether or not they felt it was close enough to downtown, they felt that because it's in the downtown district, it was close enough. So those were some of the issues that were brought to my attention.
Good, thank you. Other comments?
Most of the feedback I got was very positive. I answered a lot of questions of what about this piece, what about that piece of some of the other documents that we had put up on the last meeting. A funny one I got was actually from the Historical Society was out there, and when I went in, they went, "Oh, we have a couple pictures for you," and they brought me pictures from before 1900, when the City Hall was on 6th and Litchfield, and it was attached to the fire hall. And they thought it was funny that if you went to that location, it only took you almost 100 and some years to come back. So I thought that was interesting. So I have some more photos if you'd like to see.
Well, keep that in mind, maybe we can incorporate that somehow.
I forgot one. Somebody had mentioned, will that prevent the fire hall from expanding if we build there? If they need to expand, would that interfere with that? And of course, the noise with the sirens and stuff like that. That was a topic.
You know, I've had a lot of feedback. I've had a lot of phone calls. I think I've had personal conversations. They start out somewhat, or some of them, maybe about half of them have started out kind of concerned. But then when I explained how we did the blue sheet and how we ticked off all of the issues that the council addressed in the retreat, and then how we basically condensed those down, and then how we did the matrix for that, a lot of that fear goes away because they just kind of thought we were sitting around talking and came to the fire station as a location. So when they learned there was a methodical process that was used, people were much more comfortable. I know we had a former fire marshal here, and he had talked to me prior to this meeting started, and I'm not sure when you're going to have an opportunity for public to have some input, but probably towards the end of the meeting, maybe some of that. I'm not sure what your thoughts are on that. But we might want to, talk a little bit about some of the people that have showed up to see if they want to make any comments here. I know we are planning on doing the public process down the road, so I'm not sure how you're planning on incorporating that. So.
Well, time has been an issue for us in past meetings. I would think that this meeting won't be quite as time-consuming in our conversation, so hopefully there would be time for comment. That hasn't been an agenda item, but time permitting, let's open that door. So, come on in. Any other feedback?
Parking was some comments people were talking about. If you actually heat up some of that parking lot, was the plan for that. I explained the other side, the other corner, they were worried about actual city employees parking. So that issue was brought up, and we've addressed that.
Do you mind if I interrupt? You have the utility map here, which was requested. This doesn't have the electrical on there at all. We have a copy of the electrical. Would everybody like me to go make copies of this?
Let's have that for the next meeting. I know that was a question that I asked
Okay. So
earlier.
we'll just wait and we'll have it next time.
Let's do that.
Okay.
If you go to the site, you'll see there are a couple of fire hydrants or water access items, and just an alarm went off in my head. Are there utilities underground that we aren't aware of, and what would the cost of addressing those be? So thank you for that. Appreciate it. Okay.
I was just gonna say, I didn't have a lot of comments. I received, basically, I come to mind three. One thought that, this was a great choice and that it should have been selected last year. That was their comment to me. Another person felt like that, not to build on the fire department because of the emergency, nature of that facility, and that we're just clamping more and more onto that block, and that there's other alternatives. There's empty lots even across the street from Domino's. That would be a better selection. Another person's comments was basically that we should look at, the auditorium and Hardware Hanks, and look at, see if we can't do something with those buildings. That's basically about it.
So, and I've heard many of these same types of things. What number one for me that I've received is concerns about the noise, and I think that's something we'll just need to deal with and address. And yeah, let's try and find a way to solve.
Let's get
Chief
Frank
Hanson
slide in here, seeing we're talking about his building.
And, but like the access to downtown and that idea that it's creating a nice gateway and a nice welcome to downtown. So yeah, a lot of the same types of things. So for those of us who have participated in this process and have been sitting around the table, is there anyone who says, I have a real concern with this site, or are we all still feeling good about it?
Still feeling good, and again, no, I didn't receive any negative feedback. Almost everything that everybody else has touched on, whether or not the size would fit, and then talking about if it was gonna be 2 or 3 stories. They liked that we weren't taking a viable piece of land that could be used for other commercial development, that another business could go on, that we stayed on city property to keep the costs down. And then the questions about parking, if that was gonna be enough. And then I talked about the different people that I've just mentioned, that we go back to the fire department responding, going to a fire department parking only, and then they can go in all directions that they come in when they're responding to a fire call.
Madam Chair, the other thing that we'd ask is if Sarah could get us the price on that walkover. Were you able to get that?
No, I have not received that yet.
So for those in attendance, what we're talking about doing is to have a pedestrian crossing across Trot Avenue, so that people wouldn't have to stop traffic, if you will, to go across Trot Avenue. You could park on the north side in the city-owned parking lot there, and then people could just traverse across, and yet to be determined in design, but either enter off the ground or enter off of the second floor, which would then be where you'd have your elevator for access to the rest of the room. So we're looking at getting a price for that. Sarah was going to try to do that, but I mean, we just met last week, so give them very much time. And you were at town.
On vacation. We're not at a conference.
And,
Yes, not
and
vacation.
you were a rock star from what I understand. Appreciate that.
All right. So the mayor and I did meet with Chief Hanson at the end of last week also to talk about the site and just make sure that there was an understanding of the process that we went through and the reasons for our thoughts, and to see if there were any significant concerns, and I think by the time we were done talking, it was pretty comfortable.
So, yeah, no, I think it was a very good meeting.
So the mayor and I will be meeting with the firefighters on Thursday night. That might send some alarms off for you, Julie, because we've got the graduation for Vision 2040 leadership, but we're gonna meet at 8:30, so hopefully things are sort of kind of ready to pick up and done
They will
there.
be.
But that'll give us an opportunity to speak with the firefighters, share the thoughts with them, and hear any concerns that they might have, since this was obviously near and dear to their heart, so that's as far as the location. Okay? All right. At our next meeting, what I'd like to do is a site SWOT analysis. What are the strengths, weaknesses, some opportunities for being at that location, and are there any threats, so that we can turn those into opportunities and address them all. I'm putting that off until next time because, quite frankly, I wanted us to walk through the timeline and see what a tight timeline we do have if we plan on having this building ready to go before we have issues with the district heat. Okay? So if we can go into that, I'd like to move on to the timeline. You should have two timelines here in front of you. One is just I say tentative. This is a rough draft, and this is not in any way, shape, or form absolute hard and fast timeline. I'll be honest with you. What I did is just try and take where we're at right now and where we need to go, and presenting it to the city council as a whole, any discussions that we need to have. I looked at the timeline that Engen and Associates had provided to us in the past for what they thought as architects we would need to have for time for each of the different processes, and tried to put them out here. So this is for discussion for us. And Councilmember Meske, am I reading your face that you have
You
something?
will, but I'll just wait.
Okay. Then, so we'll go through that, and like I said, this is a starting place. The second document that you have is, I asked Finance Director Okens if he would please put together a timeline in regard to what it would take us, what the time would be to get us to full bonding issue and being able to have the financing available. I'm also going to throw out for you that I've also asked him to put together some additional thoughts on if we could possibly do this and have it financed internally. And we have the PIR, the Permanent Investment Revolving, Public Investment Revolving Fund. And that is for shorter term projects. Is it possible to do something like that for a longer term assets? We self-fund, but it becomes a fund that we would have available on a long-term basis, or if we would add it to the community investment fund or something like that. So I've asked him to think about that, and that might be a discussion. I don't know if you're ready to have that conversation at all today or not, but.
I would prefer to defer, but I
Okay.
can do some preliminary thoughts, comments if you.
Well, that's okay.
later on.
That's fine. If you're not ready, at least I just wanted to put that out as a thought to the committee as something that I think that we should be discussing and an option to consider. So, let's go through the white, boring looking timeline, okay? And we'll talk our way through it, and you have plenty of opportunity to add in and weigh in. I've left white space on it for good note-taking for changes. So obviously today's meeting referenced there. The next meeting, hopefully Tuesday at noon, will work for folks. From the doodle poll that we took, that looked like a viable option for most. And so we would talk again about those strengths, weaknesses, and opportunity and threats for that specific site. Then on the April 15th meeting, we would take it to the city council and ask for approval of the site, and also ask to proceed with professional services for schematic and design development. When we met and had a conversation with Chief Hansen, knowing that he is right there on the site, that's a possibility that we might be able to have staff oversight of that location as far as construction oversight. We do not have to do an RFP for professional services, and so that would allow us to jump into that right away. Okay? Then immediately following that, engaging those professional services. We would also have a public meeting to be able to review the site selection and allow for us to share further our thoughts and reasoning behind that site and get community feedback on what they would see for opportunities on that site. Then I wanted to reference that we have the April 29th as the 5th Monday of the month, and that would be a council retreat day. And so I would foresee that we would have, that might be an opportunity for us to have additional conversation about where we're headed with the City Hall. On May 9th at noon, which is a Thursday, we would have another task force meeting, and that's a pretty fast turnaround, but asking for a schematic design that we would be able to review. You'll see I have a couple of reviews there. I understand that, and the items that are in your packet, I would ask that we read through that before our next meeting. By the way, there's some really good stuff that's in there. The work that Engen had done in previous meetings with staff as far as the square footage that we would need, or they were recommending for different offices or conference rooms and all of that type of thing. So it hopefully would speed up that schematic design process. Then we'd have a second public meeting on May 15th and allow the public to give us input on that. On May 23rd then, we would have another task force meeting and review that schematic drawing. Hopefully, again, these are really short, tight time frames, but hopefully we could take that public comment and incorporate any changes before it came back to us again. And staff, you can tell me if, you know what, that's too tight a timeline, or, I mean, feel free to chime in here.
May 15th is a Wednesday, by the way.
Oh, well, we'll have to check
Unless you want
that
that
date.
the 14th.
No, I bet it was the 14th, because I had them all on the public meetings on Tuesday nights, thinking Wednesday nights are church night, and different meetings that we had as committee meetings and things, so thank you. Typo, I'm sure. Then May 23rd, oh, that was our second input, consideration of the schematic drawing. On the 29th, we would do a committee update. Then on the 13th, we would review the design. On the 20th, we would have a second review of the design. On the 25th, go back to the public for their input and feedback. On June 27th, we would have another task force meeting to review the final design of it. And then at the July 1st council meeting, we would ask the council to approve the schematic and the design of it. And then we would begin the construction documents, giving that a month to be completed. August 1st, have it go out for RFP. Give it a month to award the bids. Somewhere in there, I'm sure there would be a meeting with the contractors to review the RFP documents. And then the construction would be a 6-month period of time. Looking at spring for move-in, demolish the current City Hall site and let them begin that work. And that gets us where we need to be before our district heat is terminated. So you can see there's not a lot of fluff time built in there if we're gonna get in the ground and have construction start before it gets too late in the fall for trees. Thoughts, comments?
I do have a couple of thoughts. We will need to make sure that once we have that layout done, that a plan review is done by Planning Commission for the government building, probably towards that June time period, once we have a little bit more of a definite layout, so we can look at what layout's gonna look like and parking. And then we will also wanna make sure that, once those construction documents are created, that we get building official review of that. That can take a little time sometimes, toward in that July-August timeframe. And then those permits can be approved once the contractor is awarded.
Will these be able to be done internally for the site, for the construction documents, or would they have to go to the state?
I believe that we can do them because it's a city building, but I can have Tom check into that one. Sometimes we just defer to the state and make sure in case there's something that we're not thinking of.
Thank you very much. Other comments, thoughts? Go ahead. That's why you're here. Director Christensen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The risk of being the negative Nelly in the bunch, I'm not sure this timeline is achievable. We're asking for a final design to be prepared, and bid docs in less than 2 months. And we're asking for a construction in 6. I think both of those are about half as long as they need to be. My personal opinion.
Construction, we
It's
have
great
fluff
if we can
room.
happen,
but-
but that's my 2 cents, just looking at the schedule for the first time.
I think one of the things on that, Madam Chair, I think one of the things, Works Director Christensen, is that some of this will be determined by who is selected for the contractor.
No doubt.
And, you know, if you get a contractor that has capacity, you know, which we would anticipate there would be, you know, we would think this would be a favorable project that people want to bid on. I mean, you know, we're probably not talking about a mom and pop shop being able to do it. And I agree with you at that point, it's gonna take us at nine months to a year. Versus if you get a larger organization, you know, which we'd have probably 3 or 4 in town, or 3 or 4 in the area that would be able to bid on that. You know, they may be able to ramp up and bring in extra staff to, and that might be something we have to ask when we're talking with people about. That's a good point. You know.
Well, and the advantage to doing October to March, if it's achievable at all, that is more of the off-season than for most contractors, as long as the stuff is in the ground first. It just seems, and aggressive is good, don't get me wrong. I don't want to set everybody up for disappointment if we say, well, yeah, this is great, and everybody's excited about it, and when we get to about our 2nd or 3rd step on here, we're already behind, and so I just don't. I'll do what I can to help it along, but I'm not, like I say, we may be too aggressive.
That construction timeline, literally, I truly just used what Engen had referenced as a 6-month period. And that's the one area where we would have more room and flexibility, because we don't have to be until May, and, you know, I mean, we don't have a May hard date
Right.
to be in by, so that could certainly be expanded based on what the contractor thinks we need to do. But yeah, there's not a lot of, and quite frankly, it's why I wanted to bring this timeline to everybody now, is so that we understand what we're up against. So when we go to the city council meeting, we have to make a decision, and that will either be a go, or if that decision isn't able to be made, it's gonna be, now what are we gonna do, right? So, Councilman Ross.
If we did go late, wouldn't we be good up until, I mean, to me, we still have a buffer, even though the heat is out in July. We still have August, September, October, we have 3 more months in there. And that's if you gave April as the move-in, you got May, June, July, August, September, possibly going into October, that gives us 6 months that we don't need heat. That could still give us the buffer. So then, to me, the kicker is, can the other part get done in 2 months to get the design finalized? What's the stumbling block with getting a design going in 2 or 3 months? And then could we still, could we start construction in November or December if that got pushed back?
I believe that tentatively, yes. I think the stumbling block, to answer your first question, would be whatever the workload is currently. I mean, have we chosen an architect? For sure.
No.
And so right there, their projects they're already designing projects for next year. And so to find someone that has time to do it that quickly might be a challenge.
Well, one thing we said though, and I mean, the council has said this on numerous different things, that if we get pinched, I mean, if we have to bring in consultants, you know, we're willing to bring in consultants to help if we're getting pinched, you know. This goes right back to what Ike told us a year ago. And, now I guess I'm a month off, but, about a year ago, and he said that if you want to be in the ground, you need to be making decisions today. And, you know, we're finding that now when we put this timeline together, so thank you for putting the timeline together. But I believe I heard you say that you took the numbers from England's proposal. So, I mean,
What I shortened up was the schematic process, the schematic design. And
that
I
we're done.
cut a week out of that, right, because that work those interviews having been done. But if we, you know, someone else might want to have those conversations started from the beginning, but at least it'd be a confirming, and the thought from staff has already been there.
We own the documents from England, right? We paid for those?
We did. Yeah, I was looking at this is from a year ago from England, timeline. And I was just looking at, you know, it's a 90-day process. You know, the thing that jumps out to me is, you know, we're going back and forth with, you know, the council and the public meetings and so forth, and that's delaying the start. And to me, I mean, you want to have your public meetings up front, and you want the basic concept of what the building's going to be, and you have some drawings of it, and you show it to the public. And then after that, then it's go time. You start the general construction of the building and design. And you don't worry about, oh, well, I changed, you know, this bathroom, and I flipped it over to this side of the hall, and you know, I expanded this one office, or, you know, I don't think it's necessary to go back to the public like that. And so I think that if we want to have it completed and cutting the ribbon by next summer, we need to eliminate some of those steps and basically get on board the architect and the contractor as soon as possible, and then let them set that deadline in, because, you know, I've noticed over the last 2 years here, I mean, we just had a record winter this year. We could have back-to-back winters, for all I know, or it could be mild. But, you know, you have to do worst-case scenario, and so the quicker we can, you know, get the walls up, the better we'll be. And so, to me, like Sean, I totally agree. Here we are now in April. Today's April 1st. The contractors, the architects, engineers, they have contracts all the way through the end of this year. And so we're going to be pressed. And, you know, one thing that you can do to get things moving faster is you put in those deadlines, and you say you have to have it open July 1st. And contractors say, okay, and then they'll get out their calculator and their pen, and they'll start marking up the price. How many men does that take? How fast can we get that in? You can, to a certain extent, you can speed up that timeline, but you're going to pay a premium for that. So we're working a little bit against the clock, and I hear what Julie is saying as far as, you know, we do have some wiggle room there, and that's good. But to me, the sooner that we can get our design, our architect on track now, I think we can get some realistic numbers, and get our engineers involved and see what kind of, I haven't talked to anybody, I don't know about you, Sean, about the construction season this year compared to other years and how we're doing. But I know we have a lot of 2 or 3 good firms, like the mayor was saying, here in town. And, you know, the sooner that we can, you know, start giving them, you know, green lights that we're about to do this, the better. So that's all I would encourage is to consider those things here. And I'm glad that we have a site, you know, because, you know, that has taken us a long time to get here just for that. So that's good, but the sooner we can get the professionals in here, I think, the better.
So I mean, one of the things that we heard from the council, and I know, you and I have had conversations about this, one of the things we heard from the council, and I think you built this into this, is they wanted all this public input.
Yeah.
And they wanted us to keep going back to the public, and, and we've said that's gonna take time. But I almost think that, I mean, we can agree around this table, but when we bring it to the other four, we're gonna get pushback, and they're gonna say, well, we didn't walk the path with you, yeah, we've been reading the notes, yeah, we've been coming along, but we asked you to put in public input. I think when we go to the council on the 15th, I don't know if you were thinking this or not, but we go to the council on the 15th, and if they say, well, cut out one of the public input meetings, then we can do that. That speeds us up by 2 weeks. I agree with you 100% on that. But I mean, I think,
when we did the hospital, the last big project I did, we 80,000 square feet of hospital. And we did the concept, and we had numerous, I think we had 6 public meetings, and we went to the churches, and we met with the people, and we showed them the designs and such. And that's how we got the public buy-in. But then once we got the project started, I mean, we didn't go back to the public. We briefed the council monthly. There was a walkthrough as the project started. When we go out there, you do the first, brick and everything. We put up the first steel beam, just like we did out at the surgical center here. You do that process, and that keeps everybody involved. And as a project of anything of any size over 10,000 square feet, you're going to have changes. You're going to have changes in plumbing, electrical. I mean, there's things that are going to happen that you're not going to be aware of now. That's just the normal process of the contracting. So that's why I'm saying the sooner we get that involved and get it to a regular schedule of briefing the council and the public at the same time, then people will be able to provide that input, and it's very transparent. But in general, when you're designing a public building, whether it's Lakeland Elementary or something like that, office space is office space. The council chambers, some people will have some input. Hey, I think we should have computer monitors at all the councils and a giant mega screen or something. Other people, that's a waste of money. They're going to have more opinions on that. They'll have lots of opinion on parking, things like that. But 90% of the building, they're not going to have an opinion on that. But the other thing that concerns me is that we've got to look at an interior designer and looking at colors. We need to look at the office furniture and replacement. The IT side of it is going to be tremendous to make sure that we get that wired and that we transfer over all of our information. Some of the emergency things that I would like to see in the building as far as cameras and locks and key fobs, so that we're state of the art as far as access for our employees and the safety of the public. That's all got to be factored in. So a lot of things.
And that's going to happen in your normal course of action. I don't know that those are things that are beyond the scope of a normal building project. I would say again in regard to the community input, when I did it, you're right, I added in the community meetings because that's what we have heard is we want to be open and transparent in everything that we are doing. And really those public meetings haven't added any more time to it. I simply found dates within the timeline that we could open it up to the public. So I don't know that that's necessarily going to slow it down. But one of my concerns is I don't want us to move so fast that we go, holy crap, did we not think this through? Because we were moving so fast. And that's why there are so many check-ins that I wanted to put all the way along. And when we do the public meetings, there might be something really obvious that we missed that some community member says, you know what, does this really make sense? And so I wanted to make sure, as we're moving quickly, that we're allowing those opportunities for as much feedback as possible so that we're catching anything and don't have that, when you build your house and you get in it and you go, geez, I was thinking this would come out a little different than that, right? We don't want any of that remorse. So.
A few comments and concerns. First, I have a very great secretary where I work. She keeps clippings on behind her desk. of all the people that work for her, and she has a picture of the council talking about a location, and it's a couple years old, and I thought, okay, first question, this committee was charged with finding a location. We're spinning this into design and schematic and that kind of thing. We haven't gotten the feedback, and I'm glad you brought up, of our other 4 colleagues. We're gonna need that. And if this committee is going to be charged with some additional items such as looking at schematics and designs, because we haven't even talked, I thought having a location is a celebration. There'll be probably another headline at some point in the future that I'm gonna see that go on the bulletin board as well. And then we haven't started talking about what's gonna go in the building even. Those kind of discussions haven't happened. We have a footprint, but if I dare say, if we go with a similar process we've used for finding a location, by the time we get that, what should be in the building, it's gonna be another couple of years down the road, and we're gonna be in a very cold building here. My questions are numerous. I think if we are fine with this site, which is what our task was, is to bring it as fast as we can back to the council to get the rest of the council on board. If the site is acceptable, then we need to secure, I would agree, we need to secure the schematic and design piece in there. I also agree with our chair. We're talking about, we can't do that, we only get one chance to do this right, and to do it because we see this end of district heat as this artificial timeline. I don't want to make mistakes and do it wrong. If we had to find at least an alternative heat source or whatever, it's better to err on the side of doing this correctly than to have that artificial time frame. And you are absolutely right, we need public input on it. We don't know what the public, well, I mean, we have all shared what we've heard, but actually bringing the rest of the council on board and we make that decision, then we're gonna hear it for sure. And if we don't involve them until we've selected what the design of the building is going to be, we've selected the architect that's gonna do that, and then if we do it to try to save time, we're also gonna hear that as well. So I have some concerns. We don't wanna overstep the charge of what this committee was meant to do. I understand it's convenient to do so, and if the council wishes to do it, we can continue. But there are some things that we have that are sticking in front of us.
So I'm proposing in 2 weeks that we go to the council with this.
I know.
Okay, just wanted to make sure you
Well,
realize
I'm
it
not critical of
wasn't
that,
out
because I'm thinking if.
to the 29th or
If we think this
May
is
or
the
something
site,
like
and
that.
because I mean, we didn't call it a SWOT analysis, I'm familiar with that, but by putting up what we did last time, we were pointing out the positives and negatives of that. If that's the site we wish to send forward, I mean, that'll make it cleaner and easier to present, I'm not arguing that. But it seems as if some of that work has already been done. And if the rest of the council's not on board, and we're back here again, this timeline is
Then
completely
it's
out
out
the
the
window.
wall. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. And my thoughts for the next meeting with that SWOT analysis is to look at the site even deeper. Look at, are there utility issues we need to consider? Are there opportunities that we can build into the building that would be beneficial to the, for training for the firefighters that, you know, so kind of dreaming and putting some thoughts together, but also being realistic, and these are some things we need to overcome with this building,
I mean,
like the sound issue.
And I'll just add that we talked about it before, we know there's a potential $50,000 for relocation. If that becomes something we have to do because we're not gonna reach this, that's better to do that than to try to force this thing to be done in a time frame that might not be realistic. And I mean, I know eventually we talk about this building as well that we're in, and this committee talked about the idea that turning this into green space would be desirable, but if the rest of the council isn't for that, we have to explore again possible sale of this property and things like that. So I just there's a lot of unknowns.
Completely understand that.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, if we are can-do people and we can make this happen, this is what it's gonna have to happen. So let's lay out a roadmap, and at least we've got a plan.
Sure.
So,
And I think too, I mean, I think the council, well, some on the council, probably not everybody, but some on the council would be expecting us to be bringing, you know, this is what we're thinking. Because I think back to when we were talking about the issue with Rice Hospital, and one of the things that when we brought some of that information back, they thought, well, we thought that you were gonna bring us more than you did, simply because, I mean, we were trying to bring it to you piece by piece, but, council was expecting us basically to have a ribbon on it, and we didn't have a ribbon on it because it was a huge project. I think being foresightful and looking and saying, these are the next steps, I agree with you wholeheartedly. If we're gonna break this down into step-by-step piece, we're gonna be here in 4 years, and we're not gonna have a decision. But I think what I heard the council say is that, I believe I heard the council say this at the retreat, is that this was one of our priorities. It was a priority of ours when we had a retreat a year ago. And so I think that, some of these things are gonna answer themselves when you get to the council approval piece. I mean, the disadvantage we have right now is we can't really engage other council members because we have 4 council members and the mayor in attendance. So we can't go out and solicit opinions from the other council members at this point because that's doing public business outside of the open process, so. I think the 15th will give us, I mean, I'm pretty sure we're gonna have one person that's gonna be against everything we've talked about, but, you know, we're gonna have to just keep moving forward.
Well, no, and it's not, I mean, not being critical of the time frame, it's just that these are obstacles that are there. If the council thinks that this is the site that's there, obviously the next steps are exactly as listed here. It's just, how much is the council going to be involved in that process, and how much are they gonna let that process go, is going to be the answer. Because, I mean, even on this one, I mean, some folks were critical that we added more sites as we went along, but for site selection, I wanna make sure that we exhausted every possible site and either took it off or put it on the list. They're gonna wanna do the same thing, maybe, perhaps, I don't. Maybe somebody else sitting here, we're gonna keep doing the design and all that other stuff, because I have no expertise in it whatsoever. But if they say, well, we want that in this building, but not that in the building, then we'll be here for a few more years. So, at some point, you gotta let the experts do that stuff, but in my experience, at least for the site, is kind of everybody thought they were an expert in where it should be. I'm glad it went the way it did. It was very organic, and it was, it kind of came out of nowhere. And I thought, well, that's nice, because then you look around and a lot of people that had preconceived ideas about what should happen, it didn't work out that way, but we had consensus on it. So that does take time to do, and get consensus.
Any other thoughts?
I will just add one last thought, and I can't overemphasize enough, is that construction projects never go the way they're supposed to. And so, you know, if we have to move in temporary buildings and even a trailer, you know, I've done that, you know? It's just, we can't set our expectations too high. In fact, you know, I'm a very optimistic type person, but I get very pessimistic when it comes to construction, because just when you think you have it all solved, you know, the bricks don't come, you know? Concrete just went, you know, you can't find concrete within 100 miles, you know? It's, oh, and you know, when business is booming, that's really the worst, because everybody's working and the price goes up and there's shortages of everything from electricians to 2x4s. So I just can't emphasize that enough, that this is a living document, and it's, like you said, it's flexible, and you have to adjust it to make it work. As Sean said, he thinks it's a little unrealistic. I agree with that. 6 months to build this, to me in Minnesota, is not gonna happen. And having said that, but if you wanted something done in 6 months, there's an old thing called the old green dollar that gets people motivated. But we have to, you know, keep that in mind.
I would also say that we are very much an ag-driven economy, and the ag economy is not good, and people are not building the ag buildings they otherwise would be.
No.
And so we have contractors out there who are hungry to do a project. And because of that, I think that we can move this along and make it happen, and I don't think it's going to be an exorbitant price tag, because, again, we've got folks hungry to do work.
Well, that's good, that's good.
Yeah, we have a lot of, we have a lot of contractors who would probably be subs to a major contractor that haven't had work for 2 years, year and a half. You know, I talked to somebody, a week and a half ago. And they haven't had, and they're a contractor in the area here, and they haven't had any, they're doing remodels, they're doing small remodels. And they're builders of egg buildings and houses and, repair shops and all that. And they haven't had work because simply the economy is, we won't know that, that's all second guessing. We won't know that until we have somebody selected. And then they may come back to us and say, yeah, it's gonna take us 6 years.
Then we deal
At
with
least,
it then.
at least we started.
Well, I'm just gonna make a comment because it's been said twice that you could pay premium to have it done in 6 months. My opinion is that's not going to happen. We have been pitching the pennies to try to find the most economic place to go, and some of the other sites we say there's a lot of unknown of what remodel costs are gonna be and so on. So we're not gonna eat up those remodel costs by paying a premium. So I just to put that out there. I know you can do it, but I will tell you, it's just my personal opinion as a council member is I would not be in favor of paying a whole bunch to get it done in a short time window. Again, get it done the way it's supposed to be done and in a reasonable time frame.
But if we don't have a plan, we don't get there.
Correct. Well, I'm not gonna disagree with that. I don't think we spend the money that we may have saved by doing the project in this way by paying to get it done at premium in 6 months.
Mr. Oakens, would you like to walk through the timeline for financing?
Well, the schedule that you have there basically is a 4-month schedule, and that's if it's totally financed. As you mentioned in your opening remarks, we have been talking and exploring different things about internal financing. And so if you look at the first timeline that you scheduled, the July 1, that really triggers the financing portion of it. It was once the council makes a decision. And so basing it on that July 1st date, as far as the council approving it, that way, if you totally finance it, that would put it out, move it back to starting in July. That time frame, July through November, we're right in the midst of doing our budgeting cycle. And so that will work well in discussion about totally financing it or funding it internally. And the mayor will be involved there, knowing where the dollars are, both at the end of 18 and going forward into 2020. So 4 months is probably the outside length of determining how you're gonna pay for it. And if you do some internal financing, it could shorten that up a little bit. So 4 months from the date of whenever the council decides on what the project is and the level as far as the estimated amount.
Do you know, Steve, where the bonds are right now?
The bond rates, they are somewhat favorable because the feds had indicated they were gonna raise rates and they decided not to. So it's somewhat a favorable market. I know the market today was like way up as far as the stock market goes, so I don't know what kind of effect that'll have on interest rates, but they're pretty favorable. We have a lot of projects on our plate, which we will, with the local option sales tax and the other projects that we'll be dealing with. So when we go to financing with Moody's, they'll look at all that, but we have good arguments in that there are revenue sources to pay for those, or potentially revenue sources to pay for those. So that all comes into the discussion if we were to go out for financing of what our plans are for not only this year, but the near future. So as far as the city goes, we have no debt that goes to our legal debt limit, which is a plus. We have a number of things going for us that we talked to Moody's about. Midwest Campus is one. The industrial park, what we've done out there with the local option sales taxes. And so, I mean, we're looked at favorably. Our conversations with the county and the school district. So, I mean, I think the rates are favorable. I think the 4-month period is the outside length of time that it would take to finance it, if you finance it through bond.
Steve, what kind of numbers were you going to look at for this? What was the project cost?
Well, I had asked that, and it was like 3.5 to 4 million. I don't know if that's still the range or not. I have provided to the council and to the finance committee some history that we had contacted the bonding company on dollar amounts and different rates that would be available, so we can go back and revisit that and update that, if that's still the range that we're looking at.
I'm the one who threw that number out there just as a
Well, I mean, because the number does matter, I would assume.
The bigger the number, the better.
Well, a couple of years ago, when we were putting the budget together, we were talking about a city hall and a community center jointly together, and it was, you know, somewhere in 8 million to 8.5 million, but that has all changed since then, so.
Right.
The other thing is that, I mean, this would fall right into what you have here. This is the first I saw this, as everybody else, I'm sure. But this would fall right into the local option sales tax. And you know, when I talked with Springstead a month ago, you know, they're chomping at the bit for bonding dollars right now. I mean, people are wanting projects, and that might be some of what you were talking about.
There will be a large number probably out into the market, especially in the local option sales tax, the revenue side of it. This one would be a little bit different in that it's a capital.
Also, you can combine them.
Well, you can combine the processes and the timelines. They would be basically two different issues, and you're going to get you're going to have to pay a higher rate for a revenue bond than you are a geo-backed capital bond like this. Slightly higher, quarter basis point, basically. But I'm saying there's a lot of local option sales tax proposals down at the state legislature, so there'll be a number of issues going out late fall, I'm guessing, to finance those, because I'm guessing a lot of those communities don't have the resources to finance it locally. I know Worthington had a big number, Glenwood, but, so there may be a large amount going into the market at the same time. But I think we have a lot of things going for the city of Willmar compared to those other communities in that we have a lot of growth going. We're a regional center. We have tax base. Our communication with the other taxing overlapping districts is good, so. And there is that discussion about what the council wants to do with maybe some local funds internally. We've looked at that in years past on a number of even the street projects, of possibly doing some internal type of financing and kind of revolving loan funds, so. Those would all take commitments and discussions at the council level to approve that kind of stuff.
When you talk about the geos versus the revenue, is there a different demand for that? Do investors prefer one over the other? Or?
It's a security issue more than anything. You get the taxing, the backing on the geo issues, so there's less risk. And that's kind of what drives it, is the risk level.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I'll ask the question, so you've seen the two timelines that Kathy's presented, and Steve. Are people thinking that when we get in front of the full council in 2 weeks from today, that there's gonna be pushback, or do we think there's gonna be acceptance, or what are we thinking? We won't know until we ask the question, I know, but, I mean, it seems to me like we've done what we were asked to do.
Yeah, well, I think you're absolutely right. The only, you know,
It might just be stepping a bit fast.
Yep, no, I think that, you know, the concern I have is when I'm hearing people talk about that 6-month window not being enough, when we have to stretch that in, I also don't wanna go, well, let's just hope it stays warm and we can just stay in the building, because that's not a good way to function either. We're gonna have to have, you know, if this isn't gonna get done by a date, I'd like to see that date firm, that the project's not gonna be finished by this date, it's relocation time. Because we don't wanna be relocating all of these facilities and these people in the winter time. So at some point, we have to have a contingency of, you hit the date, fail-safe date, we're gone late, we need to get these workers in a new location. I'll ask that gets added, because I think that's something to show we're concerned about it when it gets to that point where we're heading somewhere else. And if we're lucky and we don't have to do that, that's great, but if we're gonna do planning, I wanna make sure we have a contingency in there.
Chief Hanson, what are your thoughts? I mean, maybe share a little bit what you shared with Kathy and I when we met last Thursday.
Well, since we met last time, I've had a few firefighters come and talk to me, and their main concern is, you know, really what's gonna happen to our building, or to the fire station, I guess, and the parking issue. That's their chief concerns. And, you know, I've explained to them a little bit about the parking stuff in the building, and I think the meeting on Thursday night will help a lot for that. So, as far as like the timeline and stuff, you know, and that type of thing, I'm kinda with Sean over here is pretty aggressive, and it would be nice, you know, but we have to look realistically also. So, kind of in a, you know, holding pattern maybe, to kind of, to see what develops over the next couple weeks. And really what develops over after Thursday's meeting. If, you know, they may have the firefighters may have some great ideas or thoughts that I've not heard yet, or concerns. So I did my concerns, or, you know, laid out my concerns last week, and I think most of them were addressed. So, I told a few people before I was very against it when it first came out, and after our meeting last week, I'm closer to not being against it, I guess. And then as more we keep going, you know, it's gonna be clear. The clearer it gets, the better it's gonna be. That's all. I think it's just the unknowns right now.
May I ask, how many firefighters, what would be like the max number of cars there, basically? I'm thinking
Well,
about
right
the
now
parking issue.
we have 38 firefighters. So, but on fire calls, you know, 25, depending on, it's all fluid. It depends.
Did you do any looking at the stacking on the south side? If you stacked 20 vehicles down there and 5 on the north side, does that give you anything?
You know,
Kind of like what we talked about?
We did look, or I did look at it, and right now the parking spaces there's 15 marked out, and we probably can stack some in. So you may be able to get 20, but that would be max. And then, you know, you could do 5 plus, but then if we get all 30, okay, that's pretty much unrealistic, but if we get all 38 or 40 people coming at one time, we gotta plan for that a little bit too.
But you gotta remember that you get all of those people from 7:30 Monday through Friday till 4:30.
You won't get all those people.
That's what I mean.
Yeah,
So at that
you
time
won't.
of the day, you're not gonna have
Exactly.
you're
Oh,
not
I
gonna
agree.
have your 38 to 45 firefighters showing up because,
Exactly.
you know, you've got a handful of them that work out of town.
Oh, absolutely. You know, I bet you we have 30% that work out of town or
That's
better.
fine.
So
You
the
know?
two needs for the lot complement each other,
Right.
because
Yeah.
the most time that the officers are gonna be available, it's the weekends,
Yep.
when the lot's gonna be empty from staff and public use.
Yep. And the other concern that I've heard also is about the training room. And don't want the training room to become part of the council chambers because there's too many meetings that may conflict. We do have, frequently that's used on Monday nights. Either explorers are meeting there, training, or we have outside agencies coming in, different groups. That's just another concern that was brought out to me just in the last couple of days, so.
That then becomes a policy decision. And that's a council decision.
I think that's one of those things we can do some brainstorming for
Right.
next week.
Sarah, did you look at all on changing that parking where we talked about doing diagonal parking? I know you were out, but did you have a chance to look at any of that? Changing how the flow of that parking lot would look?
Part of it Ike and I did have some small discussions. Part of it's gonna depend on what the, final building location would be, and how we might look at the flow of traffic and things. There is a significant setback from the sidewalk right now, and because it is, I was correct the first time in saying that it is within the central business district, which means that the parking lot can be expanded so that it's only 5 feet from that sidewalk. So that would definitely add some space there. And we could look at doing, we just would use the architects and lay out the parking the best so that we can maximize the space. But I think from a planning standpoint, knowing, how many city hall employees we have and then how many firefighters we have, that those are 2 good numbers, to really base some of those decisions off of, and then adding in some of that gap in there for flow of traffic for people coming to City Hall or extra meetings that might be happening using training room facilities or whatever it might be too. But there's definitely room for expanded parking. It'll just depend on how the building ends up laying out and how we might look at the flow of traffic.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, if we're moving forward with the SWAT thing next time, it would be very important, if you're having that meeting Thursday, that it would be nice to get a list of concerns that the fire folks have with the facility itself, and, because that would be very helpful of how we can sort of make that work, and if the training room is one of those things that is a sacred ground they would prefer not to touch, in a design, I would imagine you could certainly put a council chambers next to it with even a way to open that whole thing up. I mean, there are things, but we won't know what they are if we don't hear from them, so we need that.
Can Alex be there for a scribe?
Sure. She will be there anyhow, it's our business meeting, so she's there.
Okay. And then we'll have a scribe.
I'm gonna ask Fire Chief Hanson here. What are the future trends? What do you see as far as the size of the population of the city of Willmar today versus 10, 15, 20 years down the road? And are you looking, are you thinking of your facility, for tomorrow also? Have you thought about that and that sort of thing? How will that impact, how will this building impact that vision of yours?
Well, I think, if you looking at trends, I think trends are gonna be good. I think we're gonna get bigger, population's gonna grow, obviously. And I think that you're gonna see city limits expand. I don't know that this location that we have, I don't see that necessarily getting bigger or needing to get bigger, but in the future, we may need to look at substations. I think really unless we go upward, we're as big as we're gonna get right now. And, 'cause we're landlocked because of the other businesses, because of, the Verizon tower that's there now and that stuff. So I think future, we look at substations. I don't know that would affect this project, personally.
Okay, thank you.
Wouldn't you say that the trend for fire stations is to make them smaller rather than bigger? I mean, because I take a look at, majority of your departments are going to on-call status, and they're going to duty crews. And then you're going from, where we currently have, 14 rolling stock, probably dropping that down to 6 or 7. And then you have those staffed. Egan had plans for 8 fire stations. They're down to 3 fire stations. And the fire stations are about a third of the size of fire stations that they had before. And their staffing level went from 185 down to maybe 60. So, that's the trend in the fire service.
Well, I think that's important to know.
But that then he wants to 1.5 times his budget, because that's what it's gonna take to run that type of operation. So you have to think about that. But it's gonna end up being supply and demand. You can't get firefighters, you gotta go to other methods.
And that's the whole thing right now is recruitment and retention is just horrible. You know, you can't get anybody to commit more than a couple of years.
Get
We used-
5, you're happy.
I was gonna say, we used to say 5 was good, now I'm down to if we can get 3. You know, it's kinda getting like that, so. It's tough.
Any final comments before we open it up for public comment?
Kurt, you haven't said much as our project manager for the city.
Well, just coming from the public works part of it, I guess I'm just thinking about, of course, with the snow that we had this winter and the parking, and we're gonna have snow piles up there and snow removal from the parking lots and stuff. I know it's a temporary, where we pile the snows in the parking stalls, but it could go depending on how long we have between snowfalls. We could go a week or two with a snow pile in the parking lot that might take up 10 spots. And then, I don't know, I wasn't here the last meeting, you talked about the parking lot to the north, that is that the city owned?
Yeah.
And then so, also is that a plowing, do we take over plowing if we take over parking there too, Public Works?
So there's an agreement with Rice Hospital to do that, right?
We do. We do. Agreement with them and the county.
That's just
We
some,
share the plowing.
And not the county there,
it's not a big concern.
No, not there, but I'm saying other
Right,
places,
right.
we do the county going
Yeah,
over here.
so on that particular lot, there's a 5-year agreement, there's a 5-year out on that. And Rice takes care of that, and a 5-year out, and so the expectation would be that they would continue that on certain things.
It's a minor concern.
Right.
That's just.
But that's a good concern, so we can talk about it.
It's a minor.
Particularly if we do that overpass, you know, if you're expecting staff to park there. You know, if you're expecting 10 staff members to park over there, and all of a sudden you've got some big snow pile at this point.
Thank you. All right, is there anyone from the public who would like to share some thoughts?
I guess I'll go. I've been more than a casual observer of these proceedings, as I think you know, because I've been sitting in the corner. And one of the concerns that I've expressed to Kathy and Ike and the mayor is that we lurch forward and backward from meeting to meeting. And an example that I'll give specifically is at the last meeting, at the beginning we had 6 options. It was 4 by the end, and we've come to this meeting and we're at 1. And from a public perspective, I don't know how that happened, because there's only been about 10 days and I don't know how we got to 1.
And I would ask that you also state your name and whether you
Sure.
live in the city for our records.
Sure, Dirk Milliners.
Chairman, I'm an old fogey. I put in my first years over here on 6th and Litch as part of the building committee when we selected the site where we're at now. Spent a lot of years in the service from October of '55 until August of '99. So I'm quite familiar with operations and so forth, and I was the training officer for a good many of those last years. Can't emphasize the need for adequate training facilities. And what we have is just area to do it in now. There's no fixed structures there to augment any of that. That may arise some point in the future. There becomes a need for not only parking for the people who work in the building, but those that respond to the calls that would come in, as well as auxiliary things that happen when there is a major fire that suddenly gets centered around that facility. There gets to be an issue with how the building is constructed in relationship to its use on the interior, and the comment about how the training room now is used kind of at its maximum. there isn't a whole lot of elbow room for calendar affected schedules for when the room is in use and when it isn't. There's a need for people who work in the building, whether it's the public works people, the building inspection people, the office staff. They have vehicles have to come and go freely from the site, and they don't want to get buttoned in either. And there has been some talk about the access off of First Street now into the parking lot. If that were closed and there was a fire call, there could be a lot of people buttoned into the east end of the parking lot with no way to get out until the fire call is over with. Things like that are logistic things, and it can be planned for, but it takes some planning. And at the same time, the facilities of across the street to the west and to the east have parking lots that aren't used 100% of the time, but you can't hamstring them either. They have their needs that come and go. So it is a complex issue. The issue came up about utilities. There is a storm drain on the southeast corner of the training room that's very critical. And it has backed up in the past where we had heavy rain and it flooded part of the building, it flooded the parking lot. And part of that was traced to the contractor who had done some construction work there and dumped their leftover concrete down the storm sewer drain and plugged up the pipe a bit. And that had to be dug out and so forth. Whether it was all dug out enough to handle the next heavy rain, I don't know. But that would run north and south along the east side of the training room. And there's a 6-inch water main that comes in off of First Street into the site for the sprinkler system. And that would have to be maintained and protected from any construction over the top of it. These are minor things, but they have to be thought through and addressed properly. And I would hope that as the city looks at what the needs of the city hall would be, that you would look far enough down the road where you don't have to address this issue again for the needs of the city offices. In other words, you've got some room to expand however the indications are that you should go. And right now at that site, you're landlocked. I had brought up the point earlier that with some other people that the Roman site where the Shell station was to the east of Domino's Pizza is a shovel-ready site, clear of all utilities. To gain access to city water is easy because when we put in the hydrants on First Street and the water main being on the west side of the street meant that a leg for the hydrant had to be extended underneath First Street to the east side. And then before we got into the hydrant, we ended up with a cross fitting there so that when a need comes by later construction, you don't have to dig up the street, you dig up the sidewalk to go parallel to the street to that connection to get your utilities. So there are some things there that are planned for as well. It all boils down to how much homework you do on these things to uncover them so there's no surprises at the tail end. But the bottom line is that when everything is all said and done, the city hall can function effectively. It can expand if a few years down the road or many years down the road there's a need to expand it. That can be done. And the basic operation of the fire department is never constricted. Because that, in my book, the highest priority you got. Public safety is the critical thing. And an emergency isn't an emergency unless it's tied to the clock. And ambulances are dealing with people's heartbeat and blood loss. And fire people are dealing with a fire that's live and growing and will continue to grow until you get control of it. And it doesn't take more than a couple minutes to change the size of the fire dramatically. So you don't fool around with things that are going to cause a little discomfort, dysfunction, but a little discomfort function can result in a major fire loss or loss of life. And I can remember being to several fires where we found the victim that died in the fire at the door where he should have been able to get out. And carbon monoxide is a thing that reduces the ability of the mind to control your emotions. For example, turning the doorknob might be beyond your ability to do from the effects of just the carbon monoxide. And that's without being burnt, not just the carbon monoxide. So these are issues that the public doesn't necessarily understand. But it means that time is of essence, and that's why it's called emergency services. Thank you for your time.
And if you'd state your name and whether you live in the city.
Merle
please.
Brookland, I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, I saw you taking notes, I hope those concerns will be part of the discussion next week, because that's some wisdom there. And as I look at it, one of the things right away, that First Street blockage totally makes sense. There has to be an alternative, otherwise, yeah, that blocking off the parking would be very critical, I would think, if there was a fire and there would be stuff there. That's something we haven't, I didn't think about, maybe others that are smarter than I did, but I think that's good information. Can we address some of the other, the concern raised about, there was 4 last week and now there's 1. That probably is something we could do. I know you, and you have been a great student of our workshops and with your stickers. I applaud you for them. If we were to do stickers again, I would say probably part of the reason that we didn't do this is you already knew where the stickers were going to probably go. However, it's an exercise that, you know, if you wish to do, you can put those 4 sites back up at any time and ask for that.
Yeah, it was just a matter of time. We ran out and we had to come quite
Because I mean, I think if you were to
yeah.
do that, I think most of us know, because we've been
Okay.
sitting around doing this for a couple of years, we kind of know what would happen, but that is something that we did not do. Yeah. Yeah, we can handle it there.
Okay. I thought that with the demonstration that we did, it narrowed it down to the 1. I didn't think there was a, I thought
Well, I mean,
when
I
we.
think, well, there were pros and cons, I think, that happened, Julian, at the end. We didn't close
Okay.
the book. I would agree with that.
We stepped over the brook. We didn't do the methodical process. She had
Well, it
everything
was
all
pretty
laid out.
It was all
obvious,
Right.
but,
Yes.
but we didn't
Okay.
hang them up there.
That's
But we
correct.
all jumped to that conclusion knowing what those.
She had everything all
items
laid
were.
out here, it's
Yes.
just that we didn't pick them up and move them. Yeah, and that's a valid concern. I mean, we need to, I agree with you,
Close-
Tom,
close
we need
it.
to close the gap, and we do that in the SWOT analysis next week.
All right, very good. Anything else for the good of the order?
Can I just say that I think also that we've done a lurch since the last town hall. The sites that are now being considered seem to be quite a bit different from what were presented at the town hall a year ago. And so the community really hasn't had a chance to weigh in on that either, so I wanted to express that concern.
Thank you.
So it's imperative to get that next meeting, next public input session.
All right,
Yeah, I think it's, you nailed it again, where you talked about the importance of public input. I know there's people on the council that would want to have public input. And bypassing that piece or not addressing that piece will not be a good thing. So I like what you've done, and I like what the mayor's had to say about the need to do that. I think it's very important, because there's people that are interested in it.
quite frankly, it's an opportunity for the council members who are not serving on this committee to have a voice also, right? In that decision-making process before the final decision is made. So. All right, meeting adjourned.
Earl, you look great. I haven't seen you